Service Team Committee of the Whole order. We're getting 2 updates and report outs with some recommendations about moving forward on 2 distinct subjects here. One is the property management energy initiative and an update on the work that they've been doing. And then the second half will be report out an update on the Ramsey County Fair and the relationship with the county with some recommendations coming out of that. Traditionally, we do some quick introductions, so we'll go around. Commissioner Carter, if you'd like to start, please.
Tony Carter, Commissioner, District 4.
Nicole Fretham, Commissioner, District 1.
Just jump right in there. Go ahead.
Clayton Roberts, Property Management.
Jerry Marachek, Property Management.
Jean Kruger, Property Management.
Joanna Berg, Deputy County Manager.
Rafael Ortega, District 5.
Mary Jo McGuire, Commissioner, District 2.
Trista Mattis Castillo, District 3.
Ryan O'Connor, County Manager.
And Jim McDonough, District 6. And we're going to turn it right over to Jean. Or Joanna, I'm sorry.
No. You set it up beautifully. Thank you. Let's go
My
straight
notes
to
say Jean, but it looked at me like, oh, I skipped somebody.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone. Jean Kruger, Director of Property Management. Thank you for allowing us to spend some time today with you on the couple of topics, as Chair McDonough announced, that being the Property Management's Energy Initiative, and then information related to the county and the role currently play in hosting, if you will, the Ramsey County Fair. Joining me today in the presentation on the energy initiative within property management are going to be 2 of our staff. First, Gary Marachek, our Director of Building Operations, and also Clete Luberts, our Senior Building Services Manager. They collectively, as with others on the team that you'll hear about as we go forward, are really instrumental in the work that's been done and continues to be done within property management to keep a focus on energy use and reduction of energy use. They'll talk about the program, the investments that we've made to date, and the need for the continuing investment, because that low-hanging fruit, if you will, in terms of energy reduction, energy conservation, have been done. Now, it's the heavy lifts that we have left to do. After the energy initiative discussion, I will come back to the podium here and talk about the county fair. As you know, we have had some dialogue in the past, and I'll do a little brief update about that, but more importantly, to talk about the recommendations and the next steps that we believe are critical to the fair. And just by way of acknowledgement, I want to highlight that the work related to the county fair has been done in collaboration with Mark McCabe, Director of Parks and Rec, with Jenny Grafskav from the Enterprise Risk Management, and Amy Schmidt with the Ramsey County Attorney's Office. It is a fairly complex involvement that the county has with the Ramsey County Fair or Fair Board, and it's been a collective effort to get to the point of the information we'll share today. But first, I want to set the stage a bit for the discussion on the energy initiative. As I said, within property management, this focus on reducing consumption has been around for many years and is now really being integrated into the work that will continue and really become a priority of the county related to climate change and what we can do to lessen impacts of climate change by the actions of the county. I have this graphic related to the U.S. energy use by sector, which is from 2020, really to highlight by sector the use of energy. And as you can see, transportation makes up 26% of the total U.S. energy use. But more specifically to us and to our discussion here today is really that over 50% of the energy use is within the commercial and industrial sectors. And within the industrial sector, of course, that does include buildings and it includes the manufacturing. But when we slice it a different way and look at the residential, commercial, and the building part of industrial, over 40% of the U.S. energy use is in relation to buildings. It's a huge number, and it's a number that we really do need to keep our attention on and focus on. Building energy use, you'll hear, again, talked about a lot, and it is a critical factor in reducing our energy consumption. Although this graphic happens to be from 2014, I do like it because of the way it calls out the use of energy within our buildings. As you can see, what they define as building, cooling, and ventilation, or you'll hear us use the word HVAC, or heating, ventilating, and air conditioning, along with the other building use of water heating and lighting, do represent well over half of the building's consumption. There are other contributing factors to energy use, but it really is mostly about the HVAC systems and the lighting within our buildings. The other category you see here seems to be a kind of a large portion of the graphic, if you will, in terms of percentage. And that is really, again, in this residential, commercial, industrial mix of buildings related to kitchens or cooking activities, as well as some of the exterior, like street lighting, parking lot lighting, that is attributed to some buildings. So again, HVAC, lighting are our focus within property management, and you will hear more about that as we go through today. On this slide, I just wanted to get a little bit of the energy use or 101 to kind of set that stage. We talk about energy use, but it does get consumed in our buildings in many different ways. I think a lot of times people just think about our electric consumption, but there's also the gas we use. There's also in many of our buildings, particularly downtown buildings, there's the hot water and cold water that we get from district energy. So although we don't get that as electricity, obviously they're consuming electricity to provide that hot and cold water. But when we talk about energy use in our buildings, and internationally when we talk about energy use, it's all of those different forms of energy, and they are all converted to the British Thermal Unit, or BTU, which is the international standard. So just to set the stage that although we look at all those different utilities as we move forward, and in the US data that I showed on the previous slides, it's all captured in BTUs, and you'll see or hear us talk a lot about thousands of BTUs or KBTUs, and millions of BTUs, quadrillions of BTUs, right? But we kind of, our usage is generally talked about in the kilo K or kilo BTUs. With that kind of setup of energy use, I'm going to ask Gary Maracek and Clete Luberts to talk specifically about the work and the program that they manage and drive results for the county. So.
Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you. Chair, Commissioners, thank you, Gene. Before we get into some of the energy details, I'd like to give you a little background on the what we call the, well, let's just say there's some people behind the scenes that are integral to what property management does. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about the people behind energy and technology. And they have been led since the beginning by Clete Luberts, a senior manager for property management. Mr. Luberts is here today. But he also is fortunate to have some staff members on him, and one of them is Colin Erickson, who is a technician programmer within ETT, and as well as Erwin Roddick is also a technician programmer. Now, these individuals, they have a lot of experience, but they've also been trained and certified by a number of our BAS, or building automation contractors. So, it's a very nice thing to have in our back pocket, because with that technology, with that expertise, they're able to really dial in and customize programming and sequencing for any one of the buildings. So they are a tremendous resource for us, and we're very lucky to have them. A little bit about how ETT got started. It's been around for quite a while, and maybe, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, it's been kind of under the radar, so to speak. But ETT actually got started in 2013 as a pilot project on the LEC campus. And what they started doing for us was they started looking at energy, and they started analyzing energy use, and then with that understanding, looked at how could we begin to reduce it, but still provide a safe, effective, and comfortable environment for our tenants. So as a couple years down the line, as they kind of perfected what they did and had a process in 2015, those services were then extended to the rest of property management facilities. So for quite some time now, they've been involved in doing all of the facilities and bring their expertise and knowledge to play in that arena, and which we're grateful for. In 2019, this board adopted and approved the facility energy management policy, which has been really a fantastic tool for us. It's allowed us to kind of set some guidelines in the facilities in terms of what we do, how we do it, what we provide, and again with all the idea of making sure it's a safe and comfortable environment for public, tenants, staff. So that's been a great tool. And with the approval of that, ETT went to work, and then that's where the Property Management Energy Initiative started. And so with those guidelines from the policy that the board had in terms of energy consumption, with that new one in 2015 in terms of the facility energy management policy, we went to work and put together the energy reduction initiative for property management. And that's kind of all those things have been kind of our guiding principle all along here. And ETT went in under this process. ETT provides training programs, energy monitoring platforms, technical support, programming that I mentioned. They also do energy analysis for all of property management, and they also oversee and manage energy-related projects. So they wear a lot of hats for us. ETT is important as they are to us. They are not the sole player in terms of what property management does for energy. We've got an amazing group of building managers, probably many of them you guys have met. But without them, none of this would happen either. It truly is a team effort when it comes to these things. And it takes a concerted effort by everybody all the time. And we couldn't be more proud of what they've accomplished, because it's a team effort. It takes a variety of technicians and skills and things like that to monitor the energy, know what they're doing, how to approach if there's a problem. So again, the staff commitment has been simply amazing. When it comes to again our results, I'd like to go to the next slide here. And in your packet here is energy trend. Again, we're proud of what this shows us, but we do kind of follow things from 2008 for a number of reasons. That's the State B3, that's SB 2030. Everybody use that as the benchmark in terms of what we were at in 2008 and how we go forward. But since 2008 to 2021, property management, ETT, all of our staff have been able to accomplish a 42.9% reduction in energy usage. So that's incredible, it's huge, but we've done that in a way that's been productive and helpful to our buildings. It hasn't affected services. So it really is an amazing accomplishment, and we're proud of it. But again, it's been a team effort. And just to note there too, from 2020 to 2021, we've seen a 4.9% reduction. A little more about the goals that we've been working on and working towards that this board has put out there. We got a couple of checks by a couple of important ones, and we did meet the goal of a 25% reduction on December 31st of 2020. Again, hard work of many people. And then another big lift that we're actually ahead of schedule on is we have met the 30% reduction that's required by 2025. So again, a lot of work has gone into these, and sustaining them has also has proven to be a challenge. I mean, there's I'm going to steal maybe one of Khalid's lines here that he tends to use all the time, and it is a situation where even though we've got to these reductions, it truly is not a situation where it's a set and forget. I mean, we've got great building automation systems, a lot of technology, but it truly is the situation does not come up where you can just set and forget. I mean, whether it's a temperature, whether it's a sequence of operation, or how air handlers run, you do have to keep, constant monitoring and things, and we do that. But with all the work that's gone into this, by no means are we done. It does take ongoing commitment in terms of what we're doing, and the technology that is required to keep these things going is pretty amazing. I mean, we've always had building automation systems in these facilities going back years and years, but the ones of today are very different. It's not uncommon for our staff to be walking around with laptops, with computers, doing these things. I mean, before they'd have maybe screwdrivers and wrenches. They still have those, but now a computer has been as important as the other tools. So that is some of the goals we're very proud of. But again, the work is not done, and we do have a plan that actually it's a plan that's been tried and tested. We've used this for years. And Clete will explain some of these things, but it's been tried, tested, and given us that 42%. It's this plan that Clete's going to go through has provided those results, and all of our staff have been trained on. So with that, I'll turn this next slide up, and Clete can take it away.
Thank you, Gary. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. This, what you're looking at here this is our plan, our template that we use. We use it for all our buildings. We use it for individual buildings. If you can just key in on the numbers that are on there, I'll explain this. Number one is the benchmark. Benchmark, what that means is what state is that building in today at that particular moment. Number two, we call the reduction steps. That's where we go in, optimize our building automation system. We work with the equipment in the building to get it running at that optimum level between energy saving and comfort for our tenants. This is all done with little or no investment into the building. So it's the term in this business is low-hanging fruit. I like to call it the nickels and dimes. So we're looking for nickels and dimes, and we're going to bring that building down to where you see number 3, the flat line, and that is where we are going to sustain. We've done everything we can with no capital or very little capital, and we're going to sustain. And at that point, that's where we start looking at what do we invest in. Instead of just throwing money at a building, this is the process we take to get it to the point where we can see where is our best investment. And then we make that investment, and hopefully, as you see in number 4, we take it down even further. This template can be reused again then. That building that had been brought to 4, we can start at 1 again and start working our way down again. It can't be done, it can only be done so long with no investment. It can only be done so long with the low-hanging fruit. These are some of the computer programs or platforms that we use, and we have set up for our managers to help them be able to work towards our energy goals. Power Takeoff, first one, is a real-time tracking of all the energies we consume. It includes water also. I'll have some examples of Power Takeoff and the Energy Manager coming up, but those are real-time tools for our building managers. We've trained them on how to use them. They can look in at any time they want, 15-minute, 2-week, year worth of data to help them analyze where their building is and to work towards our goals. Energy Manager is an automated database of all the utilities we purchase. So it's a computer program that collects all that data and then allows us to run various different reports or download into Excel and analyze any way we want. The next 3 are more of your high-level programs that we're involved with. I don't know if you're familiar with any of them, but like Many people know B3, benchmarking, the state's program. These are all places where we can be viewed by our peers, or we can view our peers or the public. This is an example of the power takeoff program that we've supplied our managers with. It is, what we're looking at here is a real-time look at the Law Enforcement Center, LEC. It's a real-time look on March 25th of the 24 hours of that day, compared to a year prior to that same day. If you look at this, you can see an anomaly. It's hard to see probably the times, but it's between 1:30 and 4:30. And what our building managers would do is they would see we use more energy during that time frame, what happened. Then they would go to our building automation system, look at equipment run times. Is there a change in the program? Sometimes a change in the program in that building will cause rises like that. This particular one is a snow event. It snowed on that day. It didn't snow the year before on that day. And this was, the Law Enforcement Center has electric snow melts. So this is another example of what comes out of Energy Manager. And this, we wanted to show you because it shows you electricity is by far our biggest percentage of energy. We tend to focus on that. Not that we don't focus on the others, we focus on all of them, but you can see it's 50% basically of our energy is coming from electricity, or our consumption is electricity. This is another Energy Manager report. It's called Energy Use Intensity, or EUI, which is an international reporting level. It's basically a state of the building's energy health. And you can think of it in terms of miles per gallon in your car. So it's kind of similar to that. What we've shown you here, or are showing you here, is the highest users, our lowest users, just to give you a good sampling. And just to help you to understand this report a little more, if you look at things like the second one down, Ramsey County Correctional Facility was running back in 2008 at 183 kBTUs per square foot. Today, or as of December 31st, 21, it's running at 90. So that's a 50%, a little better than 50% decrease in the energy usage. Building square feet hasn't changed. Same building, just energy use has been cut in half. Public Works. Public Works is another one that it went from 70 kBTUs per square foot down to 42 kBTUs per square foot. So 40% basically in reduction there. We also wanted to highlight the Shoreview Library. This is what happens when you invest in buildings and when you build to SB 2030. If you look at the old Shoreview Library, 101 kBTUs per square foot. The new library, 38 kBTUs per square foot. And one other thing I'd like to point out is the square footage of each building. The new one's higher, by 12,000, and the energy use decreased by basically 1 million kBTUs. So total altogether, we went from 82 kBTUs per square foot down to 48. If you look at, if you get a chance and you go out and look at B3, those numbers are pretty consistent with what B3 says also. We included this report in case you wanted to see all the buildings. The far right-hand column, that's what's telling you what we've done since 2008. every single one of those is a negative. So we've dropped energy in every single one of property management's buildings. You see some blanks in there. That's because one is West Building, and that the structure isn't even there anymore. And then you have those down at the bottom. Those are all new buildings since 2008. This is it's recent and current projects we have going on right now. We recently completed a new building automation system at the LEC. The previous one was from 2002. Building automation systems, or BAS, are a technology that's on a computer-based. So just like computers, the technology is changing all the time. They're getting stronger. They're giving us more options for control and finer control. And that's kind of how we're optimizing these buildings too. You can see a 12.5% reduction in there, which is, that's actual. That was at year end 21. We have some current projects going on. These are some of the bigger ones, 2 LED projects with large reductions coming there. And we have 2 more building automation systems. One is the building we're in right now, which, by the way, has some of that technology is from 1960s. So that 15% may be conservative, and I think it probably is, but I didn't want to get too aggressive in the presentation. So, thank you. I'll turn this back over to Gary.
Thanks, Clete. As you can see, there's been a lot of focus from property management on energy reductions, but we know that the county goals are broader than that, and one of those is the use of renewable energies. And you've seen from the earlier slide that 49% of it is electricity. But property management has looked into these things, and I'd like to present some of that information now. And a feasibility study was completed in December of 2019 to look at on-site renewable energy sources. The study was done to identify buildings that were best suited for solar arrays, and then what additional engineering would be required to accommodate those arrays. And for property management, flip that screen here, excuse me. For property management, some of the buildings that were, or the buildings that were identified for additional consideration were the Roseville Library, Maplewood Library, the Emergency Communications Center, and the Correctional Facility. Now, there's a number of other buildings looked at, but they did not meet the criteria in a number of ways, whether it be, sun exposure, structural elements, the electrical infrastructure, what age the roof was. So there's a number of hurdles that we have to get over in order to make those solar arrays suitable for any given facility. So, but we do have some that we can look at. But due to COVID, again, that was December of 2019, and we all know what's happened from then. But we haven't done any additional engineering, but it is in property management's intent to engage additional engineers and go down that road and see what additional things we can do. And we would certainly report back on that. In addition to the on-site renewables, there also is off-site options that are available to us. And those are primarily from our provider, Xcel Energy. And one of Xcel Energy's goals, among many, is they want to be a net zero provider by 2050. And as an example on their journey, where we're at as far as in terms of that journey, in 2021, 31.8% of all the energy provided by Xcel to Ramsey County was from a renewable source. So I mean, it's significant. They got a ways to go, but it certainly is significant. Looking down the road for Xcel, they want to be at 79% by 2030, and then 100% by 2050. There is some ways. I mean, there's options out there, many of them, but for Ramsey County, we could accelerate, the purchase of renewables. And Xcel Energy does have a program called WindSource. And so we looked into it, we partnered with them and said, what's available for Ramsey County? And we do have some options here, but those options do come at an additional cost, in addition to what we're spending today. So some examples of that are this facility here at the courthouse. If we were to use the wind source program, it would cost an additional $11,200 annually for the courthouse electricity or those energies. In the law enforcement center, that facility would cost additional $14,600. And then finally, Metro would be an additional $13,000 for Metro Square. And then if we did have to take a look at the entire county and said for all of the bills that you provide us and those energy sources, what would it cost for the entire county? And that number is just short of $196,000. So those options are there, so we're presenting that to you today. But irregardless of any of the energy sources we talked about today, we're here to tell you they're all going up and going up drastically. And so here's our final slide today, and giving you some idea of even with our achievements and double-digit reductions and things like that, our actual costs are going up, and so it makes our work all that more important. And so as an example, from 2020 to 2021, dollar-wise, it cost just for property management buildings an additional $205,000 for our facilities. So across the county, I don't know what that number is, but again, significant. So given these cost increases, given where energy is going, it makes the work that we're doing all that much more important. Resources like CLEAT and energy and tech team are all of our building teams. I mean, they all pitch together to make these things possible that we presented today. So we are very, very proud of that, and it certainly makes it that work more important going forward. So I guess with that, we appreciate and thank you for your time today. And if there's any questions, we'll certainly try to give them an answer.
I'm confident there's questions. Absolutely confident.
I tried, Clete.
Before I turn it over to the commissioners real quick, I just want to congratulate the team here on being ahead of schedule on the reductions. I think that's really good. Absolutely. And then, looking forward to, potentially some recommendations here on kind of the XL Energy piece of how that fits into the portfolio of using that as a tool. Even though, as you point out, there's a cost to that, there's actually a lot of value to that. It's aligned with the value and principles of the county. So I have Commissioner, I'm just going to go around if that's all right. We'll start right here with Commissioner Mattis-Castillo, and we'll go right around.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner McDonough, and thank you for a really thorough presentation. And I appreciate going into the weeds to fully understand how this is all calculated and done. I have two questions on the last two slides. I actually think that, as Commissioner McDonough said, there's real value, and it aligns with our values to invest. I would lean for going for all county buildings. If we're going to do it, let's do it all the way as we think about investing, because it's really the long-term payoff and our values on the environment and all of those other things as well. So that would be my preference, is let's just go with all the county buildings. It's worth it. The question I had is on the increased projections of costs. We know that electricity and gas, heating and cooling is going to go up, and you've done, even though gas isn't a large portion of our bill, a 50% increase will be a significant increase to the budget. Have we looked at all, our labor unions, especially here in St. Paul, took the pandemic to go and get advanced on technology and energy around the environment, and they've done some really great work on thermal heating and cooling and how they can do it in a small. They have a great presentation at the Pipe Fitters Union Hall where they converted their whole building. It's saving tons of money. Have we thought about doing that at all? And it reduces the reliance on gas altogether for their heating and cooling in their buildings. So just wanted to make sure that we're kind of thinking of other technologies as well and partnering with our labor unions in that area.
All right.
Do you want to
Seen
comment
he
on that
wrote
a
that
little
down.
bit?
Yes, thank you. I
There'll
appreciate
be
that.
more information coming there, I'm
Yeah.
sure, as they explore. I got to imagine it's on your radar, all these other things that are out there, but then how do you pull them in, as you're working down your plan of 1, 2, 3, and 4, so you're down to 4 here. Now, what investments are you going to actually come forward and make a recommendation?
And we do look at a variety of different things in terms of what's available, what can we adopt to. The downtown facilities are a little bit more complicated in that the majority of them are on district energy. And those contracts run for, I think the latest round is like 30 years. So we've got a long way to go on those. So we would need this board's help if we were going to make some changes early. It certainly be, that would be a requirement. But we do look at a lot of them. We put in new boilers, we put in new chillers. We haven't tried any like thermal sources per se, just because we're at that end of the low-hanging fruit piece. So we are looking at those in terms of what we would do next, where would the money come from, and then we're always in this situation where, obviously everybody says this, but there's limited funding. So we try to do what is the best possible option and paybacks for those, because that's how property man has to live every day. So that has been our focus. But as we do get into these things, we are at that step 4 in this thing again. I mean, we've gone through the cycle many times. We're at step 4 again, where it's going to require that capital. So it will require some of those deeper dives into other technologies, other sources. And I did read that article on them, so I'd like to hear, what I haven't seen back from that organization yet is, how is it performing so far? What is it actually doing and delivering?
Yeah.
So we'd be happy to see that information and how we can apply it. And in the past, what we've kind of done on some of this newer stuff to really test out is we tried to do that in our 24-hour facilities, so we can really kick the tires on it, see how it works, how it performs, what it does in that type of environment before we do, because again, it's online all the time then in our 24-hour facilities. So that's kind of our little test ground.
I would just say, I'll tell you, the Pipe Fitters Hall is in my district, and they would love to have you out and demonstrate. It is incredible what they were able to do. They took out all the HVAC stuff off the roof. It opened up the roof so they could put solar on the roof where there wasn't access before. And the maintenance over 25 years, now you don't have to climb up there and do all that replacement. And it's a small pipe, and it also gave up more space. All the boiler rooms, that's all a ton of space. So they actually could make that, because it's quiet running, and they turned it into a classroom, so they gained back square footage in their building too. I know for sure they would love to have you come out and take a tour. It's really impressive, so.
And Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, more than likely, the future would be a collection of those. Not every building's a candidate for geothermal, not every building's a candidate for solar.
Right, of course, yep, understood.
Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Manis-Castillo, for those great questions. It sort of leads into what I was thinking about too, is how are we looking at options for all of our buildings? I agree that I think we should do that and just assess each building, whatever they're available for, to do solar, wind, thermal, all of those. You mentioned district energy in our contract with them, and I don't know how that all works. But if we're a big user of district energy, which I know we are we working with them to see if they want to do some alternative energies? I mean, are they? I forget where they get all their energy from, but maybe we work with them on doing solar, wind, thermal for their energy source. So, could you educate me a little bit more on what district energy uses?
You bet. A variety of things: gas, diesel. They also do from storm damage, they collect, brush and trees and things like that. And so that's one of their sources as well. And they're a reliable one. We work very closely with District Energy, great bunch of people, and they've helped us too with, hey, we want to try this or we want to try that. So they're a very good partner. But it is kind of limit us a little bit. There is statements on those contracts that you can't reduce anything more than 20% that they would recognize. So there's some limitations, and I don't want to get too far down the weeds in this particular thing, but we do talk to them. We know what their sources are. They've been a reliable partner. They've worked with us on different control strategies as we monitor and meter these things. So I hope that answers your question, but I think they're that biomass, they do diesel, but just explain that they are also vulnerable to shocks like this last, was it in January, where they had to do all of the, interruptible kind of a process where it's so cold, there's such a demand for gas that I'm blanking on the amount of cleat, but what did the surcharges result in that January? What was that?
For a dollar amount, I can't tell you that off the top of my head. I could tell you that if you really want to know, but it basically, we have a demand charge from District Energy and then a usage charge. The gas surcharge equaled the demand charge, which is a significant amount in each of the buildings. So.
Okay, I have a couple
It almost doubled it.
A couple more. I see that in 20, this is page 7, when you had your energy use trend, and we went down from, in 2021 versus 2020, we went down 4.9%. Is that because of the energy we're using, or is that just because we didn't use our building so much because it was during the pandemic? So, or is that a trend we're going to see, or just curious?
You know, it's not as much as you think because of the pandemic, because what we had to do was we had to go in there, we were running extra hours, making sure, you know, filtration was proper, things like that. So all that required extra hours, extra outside air. So we did too. We thought for a while that we were gonna be saving some money here, and that's gonna be, but it didn't turn out that way for us, but there was a different need, you know, so we wanted to make sure the buildings were safe for people that were in there. And there was a lot of unknowns back then. So I think we navigated those pretty well in places where we didn't spend money needlessly. So we tried to optimize our systems. We did training. We hired an engineering firm to look at this, saying, are we running these facilities in an optimum and safe way? We trained staff. We got checklists we used throughout the pandemic to make sure we were maintaining those standards. So there was a lot done back then, but we had anticipated more. It just didn't turn out that way.
I appreciate that, and thank you for that explanation, Mr. Chair. My last question is, just appreciate all of your learning and moving forward and trying to be proactive in all of this. I'm very excited about the solar, and I'm excited that our libraries are looking at it, and because I have a lot of people in my area, which is Roseville, that want us to do more solar, so I'm excited to hear about that. So if you could just give me a little more timeline on when that, if that is actually, I know that's a potential building for it, but are we actually gonna, when might we see some solar?
Not for a while.
We're very excited about it. We're very excited.
Thank you, Gene. But right, it's not gonna be for a while. We got a bunch of other, you know, like for instance, the project here for building automations, $3.5 million. So we are kind of tapped resource-wise right now, and I'm talking about people due to these jobs are a little catch up from COVID and all those kind of things. So it'll be a while, but maybe later in 2022 we can start at least get those studies out, start looking at them, and that would be our hope, you know, to do that.
All right.
Ryan, did you have something to add?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Commissioner McGuire, I would just add too, I think there needs to be a strategic bend, and Commissioner McDonough earlier brought this up, on the return and what we talk about. And I'd say this for this reason. I'm not sure we should build solar yet. I'm not saying you shouldn't, but $1 saved is better than $1 invested to create a renewable that doesn't, you know, but you still use space inefficiently. And we're going through such massive capital changes to our system. I think your first steps are always don't use energy when possible and be more efficient with what you use. And then you use renewables in some form, whether through Excel or your own buildings, to buttress that. And so this does not give you enough of a strategic look to fully know. But I do think it's kind of like electric cars. Everyone says that solves it all. It creates other resource issues, and it's better to get people out of cars more frequently and then have the conversation about electricity.
I really appreciate that. Thank you. That is a great, it's our reduce and reuse more than, you know, how we're going to recycle. It is that continuum. So I appreciate your reframing my thinking on this, and I'll try to be patient, but do all of those things. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner McGuire?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Commissioner Ortega?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your good work, and the rest of the staff. I guess I have a couple of thoughts here. Number one, and part of what you said, Ryan, it seems to me, first of all, Gene said that, you know, we've been pretty much exhausting the low-hanging fruit, right? But we haven't had a discussion in terms of what is the overarching policy for the county moving forward with all these points, not just the buildings, but in general. And are we missing opportunities? And part of that thinking is we know that there's going to be a lot of federal money coming down in this area in the foreseeable future. And are we taking advantage of any of that? I don't know, as a staff, are we looking at the federal dollars that are there today, now, as we talk? and how do we fit into that? How do we gear up to that? But I think the first step is the overarching plan to discuss all these various facets of this, because it's not just the buildings. You know, what do we do when we build new buildings? What are the components that should go into the new buildings? When we lease buildings, and we've retrofitted buildings in the past, what is it that we know we have to do? Even though the cost might be more today, so those are the thoughts that are coming into my mind, because I know we are doing good work. We've been doing good work for a long time in this area. We've moved. If you look at the trends from 15 years ago to now, I mean, it's huge.
Right.
But we're hitting the wall soon. I mean, you could only fix this building so much, and what are the things that we're planning to do we should be moving to?
I see Ryan, Jean, who wants to jump in.
Mr. Chair, I'll just give the high-level piece that ties back to the board's strategic planning earlier this year. Thanks for the prompt, Commissioner Ortega. Under the resilience, building capacity to respond, adapt, and thrive under changing conditions, the new strategic priority added, the big overarching statement. Ramsey County will examine and adjust operations, service delivery, and facilities to ensure it is resilient to changing environmental, economic, and social conditions. It very much aligns with what you just said about the idea that it can't just be about a building or a set of buildings. Deputy County Manager Hadeen and Policy Director Tolzman are the two executive sponsors. That will be a workshop this year with the board on the overarching piece. And I know that DCM Berg and CFO Kutza are also engaged on the financing side of how does this play into the budget and operational components. And I probably left out 7 other people who are closely working on it. But your point is well taken, and we appreciate that the board created and adopted this new strategic priority this year as a new umbrella under which to work it. And so that workshop will be coming before you.
Okay. Commissioner Ortega.
Let me just, when we do have that workshop, that we don't put parameters around it. We should start the workshop by throwing everything up there that can be done, and not being handicapped by the fact that it's costs too much, or the technology still is not there. We need to be a little more broader than we've been in the past, so we can seize when the technology comes into play, we're ready.
Okay, well said. Commissioner Fretha.
Yeah, thank you. Like Commissioner Ortega, I was going to ask if we'd investigated the federal infrastructure bill to see what opportunities exist now where we could take advantage of federal dollars to invest in solar, since we've identified our prime opportunities. But I would second that from what he said, and also add, in terms of our overall policy and approach. I know we're going to get a workshop, so that's exciting. And I know something Commissioner Mas-Castillo has talked about that I also really am interested in is, looking at those resilience impacts in all of our board actions, because it comes up more often. That's something when we're looking at our budget, like, are we willing to spend $200,000 more to use all renewable energy? That's something I would be willing to do. But that resilience impact comes into play in all sorts of different areas. Commissioner Mas-Castillo and I were just talking we had the speed limit workshop and never once talked about how reducing speed limits improves gas mileage. So there is a climate impact to our speed limits. So putting those across the board, and it isn't just buildings. We look at how much are we spending to maintain lawns on county property, and should we be spending money to maintain lawns, which are, terrible for our environment, when we could be investing in something else. So I agree. I would love to see more solar and more renewable energy. I'm wondering, because some of the prime targets, and I know that there was just a bequest for a new building for the Mounds View Library that we haven't heard much more about, but it seems like maybe this is a conversation that we could have with our library board as well, about their interest in prioritizing energy efficiency improvements. I know they were very instrumental in getting our Shoreview Library new building to be as environmentally friendly as it is now, and they may be willing to work with us to invest in some of these improvements. So it might be a good conversation to have. But and then the other question I have is whether we looked only at buildings for solar arrays. Did we look at parking lots at all? Because I know I've seen some folks doing innovative arrays in parking lots, which not only make use of what is a completely dead space, but if you think about, especially in summer, being able to park in something shaded by solar arrays, then you as a driver are using less energy to cool your car. So there's like a ripple effect impact to something like that.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Carter.
Thank you. Great presentation and great questions from the members of the board. I would probably just ask the leftover, which is if I look at our goals, the Ramsey County goals, and the achievement that you've illustrated thus far, the 42% since 2008, our goal of 80% by 2050, it feels to me, although I know the juice gets harder to squeeze, it does feel to me as though we're tracking toward the achievement of the 2050. I just want to hear from you your thoughts about that. And as I know, some of our choices will be driven by how hard or easy it may be to get the reductions from the easier items that are on your list. That may drive, and I'm just wondering if you can share how much that may drive our choice of options in renewable installation or purchase of renewable. Are we going to make our goal? That's basically it, the 2050 goal. Can we get that other 40%? And, I understand that your recommendations to us will come as a result of what you're gleaning around that. What would your projection be today?
The projections are, yes, we will make that. And that's what we look at every day, every year that goes by in terms of future planning of projects. And, we loosely, if we do 2% a year, we will make it. And so it's not, 2% doesn't sound like much, but, actually to bring that out of these facilities that have already rung out a lot already, it is going to take that capital. But if we invest in the capital and make these right decisions and have these people involved, we will make it. I will also, maybe a little caution here, is that it's going to take some, as Commissioner discussed, that it's going to take some out-of-the-box thinking to do this, because we can get these, like LEDs gives you, an immediate reduction, and that's fantastic. But we're going to soon learn, work our way out of those as well. So we're going to have to get more creative. How do we make them sustainable? Other sources. But I think everything that we see right now and what we're doing, yeah, I think we will make it. 2% a year, keep that in mind, because we'll probably hear from us more saying we need help with this, or some other renewable. But I think it looks good at this point. We're optimistic about it. I think we like the plan we have in place to sustain the reductions we've already got. So we do look forward at this, but yes, I think we can make it.
Well, that's excellent. Then we can think about the 3% and the 4% per year, to actually accelerate the achievement of greater reduction.
Yes.
And thank you.
Couple of things I'll add here to the end, and I think the commissioners really laid out kind of the continuum here, right? Continuing to focus in on those low-hanging fruit wherever we can, all the way up to, where are we at in more holistic strategic thinking here about all the tools that are currently available or may be available in the future. The one big gap that I see here, and I've raised this over the years, and it's really been an evolution. I can remember a time when we'd get this presentation, property management really had authority over 3 of our buildings, right? And the rest of those buildings were within departments. And, it just doesn't work that way. And we've been able to pull buildings into the department over time. There's always reasons why we don't do that. Or haven't been able to, but every time we've been able to get there, it's been a huge success because the property management does what they do really well, whether it's managing the energy usage or managing the long-term viability of that building and be able to continue and invest in the one big gap we still have as Parks and Rec. And there's a lot of buildings in Parks and Rec. Nothing that we've seen here today includes our ice arenas or any of the other buildings in Parks and Rec, the whole facility out there on White Bear, none of them. Whether it's, monitoring energy use, monitoring how we can invest in it, or where we can put solar energy. When I got the update, I'm thinking, we got 11 ice arenas that got some really big roofs, right? And they're not even into the plan yet because, they're not a part of the portfolio here. Over the years, Parks and Rec have always used this kind of thinking that their programming melds into the building operations in the way other buildings don't. Well, every building we have has their own nuances. This building has really their own nuances. And how do you manage that and still operate it for, a mayor, a city council, a county board, and a county attorney, and all the other things that go on in here. So I would really encourage conversations here with Parks and Rec to continue the evolution of how do we integrate all of our buildings into property management in a way that can look at these things more holistically, really utilize their expertise and strength and being able to prioritize, because that's what they do. Where Parks and Rec really, their number one goal is how do we get ice available in our ice rinks, available at the cheapest we can for our users so we can fill it up. And these types of priorities come way down on the list, but they're the ones actually still responsible for that, right? And so I really would encourage Gene, Ryan, Gene, Mark, to really start taking a look at what that evolution is to bring Parks and Rec into the portfolio. I can't buy that their programming is any more unique than corrections in a 24. There was a day our corrections facility was not a part of this, right? Public health buildings were not a part of this, and we've done a really good job bringing those buildings in. And so I would really encourage that as we move forward, we try to get that last really bit. I know there's a couple other outliers out there, but Parks and Rec is the big one.
Parks and Rec is the big one, Mr. Chair, thank you. The others are Lake Owasso and the Care Center, which will resolve itself. And you're right, I think the last building we moved was BTT. The programming closed and we moved the facility to property management for management. I do want to say that I asked Director Kruger and Directors Kruger and McCabe to begin taking a look at the parks buildings pre-COVID. It was one of the many things we set aside. We'll be picking that work back up again. To our low-hanging fruit, metaphor of the morning here, this is a hard one. And we began the transition to property management with the easier buildings. Now it's time to come back and take a look at the harder ones. So that work was begun, it was paused, and it will resume.
Yeah, appreciate that, right?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I appreciate the comments all the way around about as we're framing it. It's good for everyone to listen to as we talk about that broader strategic priority and also our work here. Just a couple of points maybe that add on that too. There's 3 levels to integration as we talk about this and build toward our next budget conversations that we could think about. One is the full-on management of, and that's maybe where we're trying to get to here and what you're hearing from Deputy County Manager Berg. In the near term too, I would just ask that we're thoughtful, depending upon how hard or easy that is as we continue those conversations. The part about holistic energy capture matters now, regardless of even where the ownership lies. Because otherwise we just can't fully navigate with clear eyes. And I hear that. Your point about the different incentives day to day of what you come to work to do as a part of your job is a really good point. That we see that in service teams across the board, that we get better when we mutually reinforce each other in different ways. And so we'll look at both dynamics to that as we move forward. I would encourage us to also think as we move, it's really great to see how we're making progress toward the 80% by 2050 goal. It almost feels like we need to now add some incremental goals between 25 and 50, which before wasn't the focus, right? It was getting to the first numbers. But now that we're there, otherwise you're going to go a long time where people are going to be waiting for one day. And 2050, I don't know, feels like a long time. So I'm not going to make any jokes about that.
Well, actually, the other side of that, though, is they're already ahead of schedule. They're over 40% now, and it's like, what can we get that day to be 30 rather than 2050, right?
Sure.
And watch that progress as it happens.
And let's just not leave it as an out year to, that far out. It would be something I think that screams as you look at it. And on the final part that comes up, and this is part of that workshop, and then it'll layer back into here, as the board has taken a stronger approach toward decarbonization specifically here as a part of what it wants to see, that is related to energy consumption, but is not the same as energy consumption. I mean, and so part of it is, how do we keep having energy consumption goals, which are a good thing to have, and now layer in specific decarbonization goals, which is where the broader priority plays really well. I think we need to present that in a clearer way going forward. And I don't think we just rely on property management to be the de facto decarbonization effort in the county. We've heard that cleared. So I just wanted to summarize. Those are some takeaways I got from today.
Perfect. All right. I appreciate the presentation today. I just love these workshops, especially when we get into, some of these issues here that so many in the county probably aren't aware of, but they really benefit, and the professionalism and the expertise and the passion comes through on these, and I really appreciate that. No matter what we're talking about, we've got people in the county that are really taking on these, not only with passion, but with expertise and professionalism. So thanks for all your work. Pass it along to the rest of the team.
We'll do that. Thank you. Appreciate that.
All right.
Thank you.
Gene, you're going to tee up the state fair, or the county fair. We've talked about the state fair for the last 8 months. We're talking about the county fair
I have enough
now.
trouble with the county fair. I think we'll just stay there.
That was good.
All right. And again, thank you for that time on that. And we kind of can't do it without doing a bit of a deep dive, because it is a very complicated matter. And if it were easy, everybody would be, cutting their consumption and jumping into the renewables world, but it's very complicated. So I'm going to switch gears and talk about the Ramsey County Fair. I'm going to just try to briefly go through a little history for you and some of the conversations that we have had before with the board, and some of the work we've done since those discussions related to what do other counties do, what do statutes say, and then we'll come with some recommendations about the county fair as an event going forward. So you will no doubt know some of this information, but obviously the fair, Ramsey County Fair, did start out in White Bear Lake. It's been in Maplewood on the current area around the Parks and Admin building, the historic barn, care center, et cetera, that all occupy space on that property. Been there since 1954. I'm sure many of you have been there, but it's in many ways a fairly typical, I'll say, urban fair with the events, the booths, the 4-H, the exhibits, and includes, of course, carnival rides, carnival booths, vendors, etc., and also a fireworks, all conducted on our property in and around our buildings. The fair, during the course of the years, has had use of not only the property around of that property, but also, to some degree, use of that historic barn, part of the Parks Admin building, the north end, the maintenance area, and use of the pole barn. As I mentioned, the golf course is actually where they stage and set off the fireworks from, that then, are visible from the property. And they also are able to use a significant amount of the property for parking purposes, which I will say has been, a little bit of an inconvenience to the other uses, like the Family Service Center, the Care Center, and even the ability to use the Aldrich Arena for other purposes during the fair. It's the fair, really, takes over the entire property. The county, from a resource perspective, has had staff that have done various things for the fair in the past years. As simple as just some of the coordination in terms of what and where things could happen. They actually have helped move stuff around. They have to mow more of the property, contributing to our carbon. Set up, take down things, and kind of a little bit of maybe whatever someone from the fair asks them to do. They've been willing to cooperate and help, including some of the site cleanup. The county, through environmental health, has also provided the trash and recycling services for this event. And we have a fair amount of utilities that are service that's installed for the fair that they use as well. There has been no fee charged to the Agricultural Society or the fair, and of course, no parking revenue to us. We do estimate that the total in-kind service staff contribution to the fair is around $25,000 a year. We did some of this work, started some of this inquiry into the fair and on the property pre-COVID. Of course, there was no Ramsey County Fair in 2020 or 2021 due to COVID. And that brings us to kind of why we're here today, because 2022 is intended to have a Ramsey County Fair. You may recall from those previous discussions that we did discontinue the use of the second floor of the historic barn for any uses, again, pre-COVID, and that was due to the structural deficiencies of the ramp that allowed access. We also identified this issue of a lack of an agreement, and we also highlighted the county's resolution from 1978, which was number 744, which provided that the Ramsey County, the board, would defend and indemnify against tort liability the president and the other 11 persons who compose the board of directors and the Ramsey County Agricultural Society, along with their 67 volunteer members of the society, as was authorized pursuant to Minnesota statutes. We highlighted what we felt was the need to pursue rescinding that resolution, and in those discussions, at your request, you asked us to go and do a little bit of additional evaluations and research, specifically around two areas, that being what do other counties do or provide, and what do statutes provide. Between risk management staff, facility staff, we did reach out to a few different counties, really focusing on the other more urban counties and what they do. And specifically for the 4 metro counties of Anoka, Dakota, Hennepin, and Washington, it's only Anoka County that has the county fair take place on county property. They do have an agreement with the Ag Society for that event, and they require the Ag Society indemnify the county, and they also require that the Ag Society carry specific amounts of insurance to protect all parties from the fair itself. We found that, again, Dakota, Hennepin, and Washington don't have the county fairs on their property. In both Anoka and Dakota, just little anomalies, they do have some provisions that the county can or will assist with some capital funds for buildings or for property, the buildings on the fair that the fair utilizes, but there's no agreement for any specific support of the fair as an event itself. And again, as we know, we do not or have not had an event agreement with the Ramsey County Agricultural Society. We'll just point out that to the degree that we have our buildings or invest in our buildings that they use, they get a benefit from that, but otherwise we're providing no other monetary support other than the in-kind services and labor I mentioned previously.
Gene, just real quick, I wanted to just clarify on the Anoka County where it's on county-owned land, but the fair on that land is not sharing other uses like our fair does, where they come in. It's actually a dedicated spot where they actually have access to it year-round. Their county's not trying to run other operations on that same site as they're trying to put their fair.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. It is for their use. So we also, thanks to the Attorney's Office, did a review of statute to understand what is or isn't provided there. And through Minnesota statutes, they do provide that an agricultural society may purchase and hold land, and I think we see that in many other counties. Also that they shall have jurisdiction and control over the grounds upon which the fair is held. And that would apply to the situation where they're using our property. When they come in and hold the fair, they really do have the jurisdiction over that property. And that includes that they may contract for security to maintain the perimeter, the boundaries of the fairgrounds. The Minnesota statutes do also provide that an agricultural society, such as the Ramsey County Agricultural Society, they actually do have the same tort protections as a county. So again, coming back to this need, or why do we provide the tort liability for them when they have the same coverage as a county or as another government entity? There's nothing in statutes that requires a county to do anything particular related to an ag society or a fair, but certainly does provide that a county board may lease land for fair purposes. So again, upon completing that review, collectively, we come forward with the recommendations that there really must be an event agreement with the Ag Society for 2022 and after. And that includes the typical provisions of any sort of an event agreement or agreement in general, the description, pre-event meetings, kind of the who will do what are the requirements, what, in this specific case, what are the indemnity, liability, and insurance coverages that we feel protect us and them, and just to more clearly define the responsibilities of each party, and in our case, specifically what the county might do. We do propose that we limit, right in the agreement, the amount of hours that the county staff will provide related to the fair as an event. And we do propose that that be more restricted to what we might need to do to make the specific buildings and or property area available to them. And that for 2022, we impose a 50-hour maximum limit on that. And for future years, we look to continue to reduce that amount. For 2022, we would be agreeing to allow their use of the admin building, the north bay of that, and as well as the pole barn. And we really want to discourage the continued use of the admin building. We know they enjoy using that space, but over the last few years, a couple things have happened there that really make it more difficult for us to vacate that maintenance area, and that is actually more fleet vehicles are being stored there, and Parks Programming has more of their supplies, such as bikes, archery equipment, and other recreational equipment, and they need to move all of that out. When they move it out, unfortunately, we've experienced a fair amount of theft and vandalism. Put a vehicle outside unattended in kind of a not highly populated area, and what gets stolen? Well, for sure the catalytic converter, if not other things. So the theft and vandalism has become a problem, and just in general, the amount of time and labor to move things, to clear things, has been more of a problem. We do suggest that for 2022 that there is no fee, and I think we are open to that discussion of an event fee thereafter to be equitable with other events. The land area used by the fair is perhaps more extensive than other events that may be held on that property, but there are frequently uses of the parking facilities associated with the arena, and it's for a fee. Bottom line is, nothing's free, right? Except for the Ramsey. So we really do think we have to take a look at that and be consistent and equitable with other events. And we do hope over time that perhaps there can be more and different events on the property. But again, we need to approach them with an eye towards an equitable approach to those different events and to the county fair itself. So what we are proposing here as the next steps is that we would bring before the board, actually next week in a board action, the request to rescind the resolution 78744, such that we can move forward with an event agreement and pursue the indemnifications and insurance limits that we feel should be applied. We would complete the negotiation with the Agricultural Society for this year's fair, and then their fair is scheduled this year for July 14th to 17th, and then we would move from that to further negotiation for the fairs in subsequent years when we have a bit more time to really navigate our way through the pain points, certainly that are going to exist both from their perspective and hopefully to lessen those for us. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Absolutely, thank you. Questions, comments, Commissioner Fretham?
Yeah, I'm wondering if you could speak to, I know how comparable these recommendations are to whatever agreements in place with the city of Shoreview for using Island Lake Park for Slice of Shoreview Days? Because I know they hold there, so I'm wondering if there's an agreement in place for that, or if there are other local fairs that I'm not aware of that also take place on county property. That was the only one I could think of.
Thank you for that. I will ask you to ask the first part of the question again as to which property?
So Island Lake Park hosts
Okay.
the Slice of Shoreview Days
Okay.
every year, and just wondering what agreement's in place there, how comparable is that to what would be happening with the Fair Board, and that just might be helpful before we see the agreement and approve it at the board meeting, just to understand that comparison. I do appreciate the recommendation to give the Fair Board some time to adjust to this change in expectations. They'll likely need time to fundraise and whatnot, but I think it would be helpful to see what another similar event gets charged and what our expectations are to compare those two and ensure equity across.
Right. Thank you, Commissioner Fretham. Mr. Chair, I will just add to that, as I said, typically for events that are held on our, Parks and Rec property or in any of our properties, such as Union Depot, Landmark Center, right? We have event agreements. So we're, well-versed in event agreements. I think what we're finding here is where we're headed is very similar to what Anoka County has. The one point you raised is the fee. And I think that becomes the question that we can look to see if there are any other comparables to ensure that we're in line or at least feel comfortable with that fee that we may propose in line with the risk and the exposure of the event. Yeah,
Excellent,
thank you.
yeah. And Slice of Shoreview Days might be one to look at, since having been to both events, fairly similar size and scope, and both on county property.
Okay. Commissioner Ortega, then Commissioner McGuire.
The question, first let me give you the feedback I've received over the years with the county fair. And as we've evolved, I don't think that activity is aligned with our values and a lot of other issues. So I'm trying to, how do we interject or bring that discussion to the table with those folks? Because quite frankly, the county, we're a fully developed county, so our county fair is sometimes different from, let's say, Dakota or Anoka in terms of they're more traditional. But in terms of the actual participants, I mean, it's not a diverse attendance by other communities. In terms of their board, it's not a diversified board, and any attempts at that, certainly by my speaking with them, I'm going way back in the past here, you might have some token in the past. Members that come on don't last very long because there is no willingness for change in terms of how the organization is run. So I'm raising those issues. I mean, I have no problems with the homework that's been done. I think we're moving in the right direction. But at the same time, we need to get clarification as to a board policy. We have our own, we've instituted our own goals and values, and those that are associated. To what extent do we tolerate deviations from those goals and values by organizations that are around us and depend on us to some extent, even though we've been cutting that down for their own existence.
Mr. Chair, if I may, that question's a little broader than the property management director, but I do want to say that.
I know, but my privilege is I can bring it up at any time.
And I'm here to catch it. So, Policy Director Elizabeth Tolsman and I had this conversation earlier this week. I think it really is time for us to develop a countywide policy and bring it to the board for this body's consideration for precisely the reasons that you mentioned. And that we shouldn't be handling this on a department by department basis, and we shouldn't be asking directors to make those judgment calls, but rather we bring that policy forward. And with your endorsement of that, that will be what we will follow up on.
I also think these recommendations are a first step towards that.
Yes.
You know, because this is a good example of loose ends that are out there, right? 10 years ago, there were a lot more. Things that were kind of put together, you know, you could say by the good old boys club or whatever, right? These kind of unique arrangements that weren't necessarily consistent with how the county did business in general with most of its partners. And we had a number of these, and most of them we've been able to, you know, kind of clean up as we go. You know, the recommendations that we're moving forward, I see as a first step towards that, right? We start treating them as any vendor that would want to come and rent space from us to hold an event, right? And then we're starting to get into the, you know, moving closer a little bit to the equity and the values piece of, we don't care who you are, we're going to treat you all the same. And this group has been treated in a way that no other group has been afforded that treatment. So we're starting that process. You know, I think what you're asking and what Joanna talked about is, you know, at what point do we not even want to partner with certain organizations because they don't actually, you know, help us move our values forward within our community, or they're not supporting our community in a way that we support our community through our values. So. Anything else, Commissioner Ortega?
No, that's it, Mr. Chair, you capitalized it very well.
Commissioner McGuire.
And I really appreciate that question too, because I was sitting here thinking, you know, it's called the Ramsey County Fair, and so people are thinking that it's sanctioned and condoned and aligned with our values, and I just so appreciate this conversation and I welcome this workshop, and it does go way broader than property management. It's who do we do business with. So thank you, Mr. Chair. I think you and Commissioner Ortega have said it very well. With one of my questions I had, and so then specifically to the county fair, which I had never been to until I became a commissioner. I mean, I'm a state fair person because it's right in our area as well. So I have a couple questions, and these have come to me from others as well. So when we talk about the admin building, that's not the barn. So the barn is just not even a part of this at all, right? So I know the barn has been used for arts and productions and judging and things, and so that's one of my questions is, like, the barn I know needed a lot of repairs, and we're not having the Fright Farm there, and that's all a good thing that we aren't liable for all of that. But just, I forget where the arts in program, because I know that county fairs are entrance points to the state fair for judging and all of that, and so I'm just curious. And usually that was happening in the barn, as far as I understand. So can you just talk about that, and then I have another follow-up question.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner McGuire, Mr. Chair. We did discontinue, right, use of the second floor of the barn, and that is in fact where they did do some of their judging and had the arts in. I can't definitively state, but I believe they had those programs in the north bay of the admin building the first year when we didn't allow it in the barn. So they moved it to an alternate location. And again, nothing happens on the second floor. They certainly do prefer having access to a building, right, with lights and power and all those things. But as you state too, many fairs utilize a whole lot of temporary structures and tents. So there's options. From their perspective, those options come with a cost. but we just can't allow, the use of the barn. The first floor of the barn, because bringing it up, the first floor of the barn still does serve as the office space for extension services, as it has for a good number of years. And the fair board does have a small amount of, I'll say more storage than office, but a small portion of the first floor that they use for a little bit of space.
So I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it just brings lots of questions like where does extension come into this? Because I know that extension is often a big part of these county fairs, and I serve on the extension board. And so I'm trying to think of how that matches with the County Fair Agricultural Society, and I actually don't know very much about them. Like, where do they get their funds? And maybe it's just a county fair, which if they don't charge, they don't really get funds. And so I'm just curious where extension matches with agricultural societies. And that may not be your question as property management, but it's in my head. And so I guess I don't know who I ask these questions of, but I might do it at extension.
Commissioner, I can carry that back to Information Public Records. I think the Extension Committee is connected to that structure. I'm happy to carry that question back and get an answer for you.
Thank you for that, because I am concerned. I mean, we do have 4-H, and we do have people that like to get to the state fair, and and I'm thinking some of these actions, which I support, of how we're dealing with our county fair, they may not be able to continue to do them. And then what do we do if the county fair ceases to exist? Where do our people go for that? Because I know a lot of our people go to the state fair, but where do these young kids with 4-H end up going? So those are some of my questions.
Thank you.
And I'm going to jump in on that a little bit, right? Because I think this is one of the difficulties here, where you go back to 1954 and kind of this process of this being set up through kind of the, and I wish I had a better term, but the good old boys club, right? The way it was set up, right? But it abdicated or alleviated the Ag Society from taking responsibility on those things that you're talking about. Every other Ag Society around us has had those responsibilities to be able to, that lies in their bailiwick, to be able to provide those opportunities for their community to participate, whether it's through 4-H and through the county fair and on to the state fair. But that was their responsibility. And the way this relationship has been so murky with our Ag Society, we've basically taken on a lot of their responsibilities or alleviated it, whether it's financial or providing space or helping them out. And this is going to be tough on them. I'll get some calls. I can guarantee you we will get some calls, because this is a big change. But in reality, this is putting responsibility back on to the Ag Society, which is actually recognized in statute and has roles, right? And these are what you're talking about are the roles that fall into their responsibility, and it's been blurred over the years because of the way that we've interacted and they've interacted with our state fair and how it's worked. So, my hope is these agreements are going to bring clarity about those roles and responsibilities, and it's a change for us, but it's going to be a change for the Ag Society and the state board on, okay, now we've actually got to follow through on the responsibilities that the statute puts in place for these local Ag Societies to run these county fairs, to, be the events and the venues to get to the state fair.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that background, and that was what I was trying to process in my head, is all this, and whose role is it? So thank you.
Yeah. Yep. Any other questions or comments? The one thing I want to make sure we're clear on, because the recommendations here about is certainly getting to the agreement. But the page before actually has some frameworks on what that agreement would look like, and I want to make sure that Jean has clarity and Joanna has clarity that we support at least this framework that they've laid out, not just the fact event agreement, but these are key frameworks here that. Jean needs to know that the policy board or the governing board here is supportive as she moves forward on these changes. I'm seeing shaking of the heads, for you to continue that work and move forward on that framework.
Yes, thank
Anything
you, Mr.
else?
Chair. And I appreciate that, and I also appreciate your comment that there could be some phone calls placed
Oh, yeah.
to some of you, all of you, But it really is necessary that we move this agreement
I was
forward.
gonna make an announcement, just call Gene.
Well, I think she hopes they do, because she's ready for them. Right, right.
Thanks to all of you and for the conversation today. On the broader policy piece, as Deputy County Manager Berg talked about, that was something that we were hoping to get some idea about bringing back as a broader piece. And in some ways, this reminds me a bit of going through a naming policy conversation, which was never easy. But as I've seen other entities go through similar conversations, I really appreciate that you all did that a few years ago, and now we get to look back on that. And I think this is another one of those in that evolution. So we will work on this, and we'll do everything we can to be thoughtful from all angles, and we'll do short and long term.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
You know, and before we adjourn, I think which might be helpful, because there will be change here, and, you know, they've met with me, they've probably met with most of us, but they certainly will put a lot of pressure on us. I think keeping in communication with the chair here as we move forward on these agreements, so that, you know, as individuals, I can remember, we actually used to give them money. I think we gave them
right.
25 or 50,000, and there was a time in the budget we took that back. And I mean, it was like the world was coming to an end when that happened, and this may, in some respects, actually be a bigger impact to, you know, this board and how they have to move forward. So, all right, with that, nice, thank you. We're adjourned.
Support. Appreciate it.
One-